All right, thank you so much, Rachelle, and welcome to all of our attendees. I hope you can see me. Thank you all for bearing with us as we get started here. I am so excited to welcome all of you to Zoom. We are having an interfaith panel discussion here today around our fall exhibition, Drawing the Soul Toward Truth, Hindu and Muslim Sacred Geometry. My name is Lydia Webster. I'm the assistant curator here at the Center for the Arts and Religion at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. I am excited to hear these three artists talk about their work in the exhibition that was curated by GTU PhD student Rachelle Syed, who is also the organizer of this event today. Before we get started here, I just want to let you know about some events that we're having coming up at CARE. Firstly, make sure to come back to part 2 of this event on November 13th, when we'll be having an academic panel around this exhibition, also organized by Rachelle. And for those of you in the Bay Area, come by for our real life event, which is happening next week on Thursday, November 6th. We'll be having a socially distanced opening reception for our exhibition Art Window. And finally, we do have a new art space student group at the GTU called the Creatives Cove. So if you want to get involved in any art space talks, workshops, trips, activities, you should look out for more information about that. If you do want to learn more about any of these opportunities, I will put our information in the chat box so you can get in contact with us. All right, so I'm going to pass over to Rachelle, who's going to take it away. Thanks so much.
Fun of Zoom. Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to welcome you to this event with our wonderful artists, so let's jump right in. So good evening and welcome to the Interfaith Roundtable with some of our artists from Drawing the Soul Towards Truth, Hindu and Muslim Sacred Geometry. I'm Rachelle Syed, a doctoral student in the Center for Dharma Studies and the guest curator for this exhibition. Drawing the Soul Toward Truth brings together a diverse group of Muslim and Hindu artists in a project of interreligious dialogue facilitated through aesthetic experience. Underlying the premise of this exhibition is the understanding that aesthetics, which in this case includes art as well as music and embodied practices such as pilgrimage, contribute a necessary layer to interreligious encounters that are often missing in contexts which are more based on human religiosity as a purely intellectual exercise. The gallery here functions as a third space, necessary for the production of meaning. Ruth Illman, who has written extensively on art and dialogue, writes that it is only in relation to the other that we can truly become an I, as it is only against the background of a shared language we can talk of finding one's own voice. The third space is one that is neither possessed nor dominated by either party. Instead, it is a shared space where the flow between different realms of meaning and beings are interconnected and shared between those engaged in dialogue. This, of course, refers both to interreligious engagement and intra-religious engagement, which is represented here by the diversity of experiences and creative expressions offered to us by these amazing artists, who truly demonstrate to us that Islam and Hinduism are both global traditions with as much diversity within them as there is between them. This exhibition, working as a third space, is also meant to help disrupt essentialist understandings of the other, allowing for a more complex and nuanced encounter. In so doing, both parties have the opportunity to explore differences with what Illman calls an open-ended playfulness and creativity through which there is the potential to enable differences to mutually transform each other without resulting in any final fusion. While commonality brings us comfort and helps us humanize the other, through difference, we help each other grow and flourish. The dialogue we're having today is what Leonard Swidler would call a dialogue of the heart. He wrote that in the dialogue of the heart, we open ourselves to receive the beauty of the other, because we humans are body and spirit, or rather body-spirit. We give bodily spiritual expression in all the arts to our multifarious responses to life: joy, sorrow, gratitude, anger, and most of all, love. We try to express our inner feelings, which grasp reality in far deeper and higher ways than when we're able to put, excuse me, into rational concepts and words. Hence, we create poetry, music, dance, painting, architecture, the expressions of the heart. The goal of the dialogue at hand is to explore in what ways art lends itself to our understanding of the other. We will be discussing interpretations of sacrality, the role of art in spiritual expression, sacred geometry as an art form in and of itself, and the human-divine relationship as it is expressed through the artwork of drawing the soul. Clearly, dialogue has tremendous potential in ongoing efforts to address deeply complicated issues, but the most human aspects of dialogue cannot be ignored. Dialogue requires a relationship of trust, allowing all participants to feel safe and heard. This relationship takes time, and dialogue is an ongoing project. Our dialogue represents an initiatory one, in which we're all sitting down together for the first time and just beginning to work on those relationships. For this reason, we will remain focused on the topic at hand for the course of this dialogue, but it really doesn't have to end there. It is my hope that this dialogue will serve as an inspiration for others who are ready to begin dialogues in their own contexts. We will begin today with an introductory statement from each of our artists before moving into questions. Already beginning the dialogue, the questions I will be asking today came from the artists themselves as they viewed each other's work. I will first read the question and each panelist will respond in turn, after which they will have an opportunity to respond to each other, ask follow-up questions, and so on. Audience members may also submit questions through the Zoom chat box, but are kindly asked to remain within the topic at hand. It is also important to understand that this is a dialogue of experience, not a presentation on art in Islam or Hinduism, respectfully. The panelists present will be speaking for themselves from their experience with their art and their own spirituality as members of these traditions. It is my pleasure now to introduce each of our guests, and in this order we will also answer questions. Beginning with Adriel Ramirez. Audrey is an artist, a Krishna Bhakta, and a student of the Center for Dharma Studies at the Graduate Theological Union, where he is doing his MA in Hindu Studies. Of his participation in this project, Audrey said, "This exhibition was particularly intriguing to me because it caused contemplation on the shape of bhakti, an art of learning to truly love. The Rasa Lila, which suggests a circle of infinite loving reciprocation, first came to mind. I then thought of the heart as an almost universally recognized symbol of love. Audrey's work invites the viewer to contemplate their apprehension of and experience with love, about which he adds, as much as I'd like to render my own conviction as to what geometric shape best represents bhakti and love, I feel it is indubitably up to the lover and her beloved. For those of you who may be new to the idea of bhakti, it is a spiritual path, or yoga, of loving devotion towards the divine, often in the form of Krishna or forms of Mahadevi, the Great Mother, such as Durga or Kali." Next, I'm pleased to introduce Sarah Mohr. Sarah has been a dedicated artist since high school and turned her attention towards religion in 2000 after receiving her MA in Religion and Psychology from the GTU with a certificate in Islamic Studies from the Center for Islamic Studies. Her work focuses on the way art functions as a manifestation of sacred space, and those who once and still make sacred space, including any artist who sees the sacred as a malleable force, open to containment in ways that serve God's expansion. She said, "I intend for my work to inspire other artists to create, and to create beauty. God is beautiful and loves beauty." Next, we welcome Zahra Ammar. Zahra is an award-winning Pakistani-born artist based in Sacramento, California, where she experiments with traditional structures to create contemporary ones. Of her work with sacred geometry, Zahra says, "I believe that in geometry, the soul finds some connection at a level that is hard to put into words, and that her intent is not to construct a soliloquy, but to draw the onlooker into their own dialogue." Her work can be found on display at Kaiser Permanente, Dignity Hospital, Sutter Health, California Medical Association, and in private collections around the world. I'm also grateful again to welcome Laura Dunn, who has kindly agreed to read statements and responses from two artists that could not be with us today. Laura Dunn is a PhD candidate with the Center for Dharma Studies, where she is researching the social and ethical implications of tantric imagery in contemporary and cross-cultural ritual contexts. Laura's research looks intently at tantric goddess imagery as a phenomenological force, that is, images that are felt as well as seen. She is also the managing editor of the Journal of Dharma Studies and the writing coordinator of JST's Writing and Student Support Program. Laura has also taught courses in religion, yoga, and tantra at the University of Hawaii's Windward Community College and the Graduate Theological Union. She is also an excellent and accomplished photographer. Laura will first be reading a statement from our artist, Grant Burse. Grant creates modern decorative Islamic art, traditionally hand-carved in a variety of select Scottish hardwoods. He began as a woodcutter in the plantation forests of Scotland, then to the workbench, where he now produces fine furniture and cabinetry. Grant's work is inspired by traditional decorative Islamic art and sacred Quranic calligraphy. He says, "I turn wood to reveal a unique inner beauty appropriate to present the carved decorative and calligraphic designs symbolizing and proclaiming the divine." As a contemplative artist, the practices Grant employs in producing these works are an intrinsic part of and a reflection of his own journey within Islam and the reality of the divine. Finally, Laura will be reading statements on behalf of, on behalf of Vera Vandendries, who lives in Kensington, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. She received her MFA in sculpture at the University of Maryland, and as a graduate student, she met her guru, who taught meditation and the scriptures of India. From that time onward, her outlook on life changed, and her art has taken on a deeper meaning. Vera draws upon knowledge from Hindu teachings to understand more fully the symbolism of the archetypal forms she uses. The use of geometric shapes in her art is reminiscent of yantras, which serve either as a centering device or as a composition of the energy pattern of a deity. The archetypal forms of a yantra help to lessen outward mental tendencies, drawing the viewer into the intended purpose. Vera hopes her art serves a similar purpose, to take the viewer beyond the mental construct of the world to the divinity within. And with that, I would like to invite our panelists to present their statements, beginning with Audrey.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you so much. That was really nice. Very amazing introduction to everything. And definitely a nice segue into what I would like to share. I just wanted to say that I'm very grateful to be part of such a wonderful group and diverse group of artists from really around the world. And it's just been something that's been very, very nice to be part of something that's unifying, and during such daunting times for us all, really, because everyone around the world has been affected in so many different ways. This is just definitely a beautiful event to be part of, and so I'm very grateful to be with you guys. I guess I just wanted to share a little bit about how I got here. It's definitely been yeah, it's been a long road. I guess we're all on a different journey towards something that we feel is much greater than we are. And so in various times of my life, there's definitely been ups and downs, and maybe varying, kind of being led off the path at some points, but to be able to, be part of this event where we're trying to bring everyone together and understand much higher grounds, I think is really a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for the invitation.
I'm not sure. I think Rachelle's connecting. I think she said to go in the order she did
Oh, sorry, everybody. I had a bit of a disconnection. Please, Sarah, go ahead.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد سيدنا سيدنا بريكا سيدنا محمد سيدنا محمد سيدنا محمد alright Robert Asher Sajid Sudan I want to say thank you so much to Care and to the Dugon's Gallery and to you, Rachelle, and all the amazing work you've done. And it's really an honor to be a part of this gathering. I completely agree with what Audrey was saying. You know, it's just an incredible opportunity to come together and speak on love and peace and harmony, and you know what brings us together, and how we can coexist in unity, and so I'm incredibly honored. I was incredibly honored to be a part of the exhibit in the first place, and to be part of this panel is just really, really, really wonderful. So I'm really, really grateful to be here. Thank you. In terms of the artist statement, you know, when you read my statement, Rachelle, you said some of it, but you know, this one I want to say a couple other things. One is that when I started, Rachelle mentioned that I moved towards religion and away from art in terms of my career, and then moved into psychology. But in terms of my art, there was a point where I made the intentional decision to start working in terms of sacred space in my art. And immediately previous to the exhibit, The Call for Artists going up, I was starting to work with the concept of geometry as creating sacred space, and expanded on that when I heard the Call for Artists to the exhibit. And basically my work in terms of geometry is related to the idea that God is reachable by logic. We can all see truth. We all know truth. When we look at the world, we can all see truth. We can all see beauty. There are things that everyone on earth can recognize as beautiful: a butterfly, a flower. There are things that we can ascertain about the nature of the divine purely from our commonalities as human beings. And geometry is a reflection for me in my work of that underlying structure that we're harmonizing with and magnetizing with when we see truth and when we see beauty. It's a reflection of this in art, in architecture, and music, and in my work trying to access that. Contemplation, of course, according to the Islamic tradition, is worth more than worship. And art is both contemplation and creation, and as a final vehicle for reflection when it is created. So it's a process of contemplation creating it, and then a process of reflection once it's created. Duchamp's famous line that the viewer completes the work. So, you know, the construction of sacred space through geometry in art is an opportunity to explore these underlying structures, both in the creation and the reflection on it. And personally, for my work with geometry, I've been working a lot with floral form and the juxtaposition of floral form with geometry as a counterpoint, the concept of desire and unbounded expression over structure and form, and the concept that life breaks the form. That when we experience life, there's this underlying structure, that this underlying harmony, and that constantly life is a constant rupturing of that structure. So my question that I'm asking through my art to some extent right now is, how is there beauty in that? How is it the flowering of life over the structure? I have mentioned this in the opening reception. I'll just say that there's a Sufi conversation about the religious life, which is that if it was just a gate and no garden, the wild animals would be kept out, but there would be no flowers. If it was just flowers and vegetables and no gate, then all of the chaos of the world would come in and you would have no protection. But that the religious life is both the fence and the gate and the flowers in the garden. So the work of my work reflecting on geometry is kind of a question of how does the floral form and the underlying structure of the geometry reflect that the structure and the life within the structure. And I want to close with the thought that, in a sense, interfaith dialogue is an opportunity for the same boundary and unboundary, the concept that we have the boundary of the dialogue, but we have the free-flowing conversation that happens within it. And I hope over the next few brief minutes that we have together to continue to question how life expands and breaks the form and produces beauty within our interaction. So thanks for letting me speak. Thanks for letting me be a part of this. And I'm looking forward to the
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was beautiful. Zahra, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Again, I'd like to reiterate what Sarah and Adri said before me, that it's been an honor to be part of this on many levels, on a personal level too, but on many other levels as well. I got to connect with amazing people and got to see other artists doing their work and, you know, having certain beliefs while working. And that just, because, you know, as an artist, we usually close ourselves up, and often we don't get that chance to connect and look into other people's minds, you know, one-on-one. So it's hard, especially nowadays. But also because geometry for me was something that drew me in, and it wasn't, when I was creating art, I wasn't really focusing on geometry as my main line, but something that was a curiosity. And I lived in the Middle East for around a decade, and I was exposed to a lot of sacred Islamic geometry, and I just wonder, you know, how those structures were built so long ago. And, you know, it was a question. So when I moved away from that space, and sometimes this happens that when you're engulfed in something, you really don't, when it's taken away from you, you kind of crave for it. So I tried to figure out how to learn that. And then I took some basic things, you know, I learned basic things under a geometer, and then started on my own. And it was just for my own pure pleasure, but it just literally drew me in. And 3 years onwards, I'm here amongst other amazing artists, you know, sharing the love for geometry is just amazing. Drawing from what Sarah said earlier, I have, if you look at my work, I do florals, I do geometry, I try to merge the two together. And, you know, for the longest period of time, I wanted to do something that is more concrete. Like people would say you have two really diverse themes. For me, I tried to pick one over the other many times, but I just couldn't. I couldn't make myself do it, because both of those themes really speak to me. And I thought a lot about why this is so, and realized, because if you go down to the microcosm of it, or, you know, like take a very large view as well, everything centers upon geometry, even the florals, even nature itself, even the chaotic things out there. Everything has a balance in the end. Everything has a structure. And if it doesn't, it's moving towards a structure, right? So that's me. Yeah, it's just an amazing opportunity. And one other thing that this has given me is an opportunity to sit down and really question myself, which is extremely important if we want to go forward. Usually we're doing something because we're inspired, or, you know, we're curious, or we want to just try out something. usually we forget to question ourselves, the question why. Because it's difficult to answer, and there might not be many answers to it, or there might be a multitude answers to it, because only after we walk the path can we look behind and see, where we've come and where we've landed. So this has provided me this. In fact, from the time that Rachelle, you contacted me to this point, it's been a year. I've grown as a person because I asked myself questions of, what's dear to me and how I see things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zahra. Absolutely beautiful. Laura?
So I'm starting with Grant's introduction, and this is what he says. Grant says that Islamic geometry as a creative means to reflect a sense of unity in the apparent diversity of creation, along with all sacred geometric-based arts, are forms of expression before and beyond language. Symbolically containing all the potential of words and their meanings, offers both practitioners and viewers subtle approaches in realizing the drawing of the soul towards truth, which is in my belief the key, the sole purpose, and the end game of all creation, to seek the sacred, which is the truth, the real. This truth in absolute and indivisible singular reality, unchanging and eternal, before and after time, from which all creation is manifest for its allotted duration and returning complete in its purpose to its source, in its very nature, is a universal and all-encompassing truth, revealed in all creation and made apparent and discernible in our realm of conscious awareness through the enlightened and perfected beings we call prophets and messengers, blessed with knowledge of the truth, to guide us to the subtleties and belief in the absolute. It's unfortunate that in modern times, through the rise and prevalence of materialism, which up until the early 20th century was considered the same as atheism, it has grown so much that absolute truth is now viewed, even among some who proclaim belief, as an outdated concept, and even as an insult to human intelligence. In creating sacred geometry as an evident creative expression of the universality of truth, artists and creatives with belief and intention in drawing the soul towards truth embark on a journey of creative dialogue. Initially, the subtle inner artistic dialogue takes place, and in itself is a reflection of the unseen dialogue of the soul with the real, however close or distant we may be from that reality. And in essence, free from any subjectivity and cultural and religious ideals, it is still universal and pure. The external dialogue then between artists, their work, and appreciators of sacred art offers a rare opportunity to reveal and contemplate on this initial inner dialogue, giving some substance to the abstract, sharing what we are able to of these things, and God willing, expanding the wider recognition that all these apparent external divisions, oppositions, and things that separate humanity is not sacred, the one absolute truth, but rather a consequential construct of belief in materialism and the controlling powers that promote this belief for their own ends.
Thank you so much, Laura. So Laura was reading on behalf of Grant Burse, who was unable to join us today. And then Laura will also now read Vera Vandendre's response, or her statement.
And I have Vera's statement and questions kind of rolled in together. So I'm going to start at a certain point where the statement appears to start. So just letting you know. So Vera says that a few years ago, or as an artist, I feel a very strong connection with the creative energy or power. Throughout India, this power is known as the Devi. The Rig Veda beautifully tells us the Devi creates and dwells in all worlds and permeates the earth and heaven and all created entities with her greatness and dwells in them as eternal and infinite consciousness. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to go to India and participate in the celebration of Navaratri, which was recently, the 9 nights of the Devi. We worshipped her each morning and evening, and by the end, my connection with her grew and my heart became so full. When I returned home, I knew I wanted to honor her through art. Since there is only oneness, one truth, I decided to start with the 8 forms of Lakshmi. My aim was to convey her essence. I felt the best way was to use the basic geometric shapes. In India, there is yoga called Kundalini Yoga that focuses on the psychic centers of the body. Each center is represented by a geometric shape that symbolizes one of the 5 elements of nature. From my point of view, the connection of nature and the use of geometry seemed naturally to be associated with the Devi. My hope was that by using the sacred shapes, would infuse energy into the artwork. Before starting a piece of art, I would contemplate the meaning and essence of each form of Lakshmi and pray for her guidance. Interestingly, I used the same geometric forms in all 8 pieces, but the size, location, perhaps repetition of them, was an important factor in creating the feeling of each Lakshmi, and color enhanced it. The vertical artworks have a linear shape of a window or doorway that envelops all other components. And the artwork with the square format has the 4 cardinal points or gates reminiscent of the yantra. These openings are meant to draw the viewer's attention and be drawn in, and to take the time to discover what the artwork has to offer. And in so doing, it's my hope that the observer be drawn toward truth.
Thank you all so much for sharing these introductory thoughts with us. They help to kind of frame the questions that are coming. They help us get to know each other a little bit more and where we're coming from. And I hope that perhaps they've already started to encourage you to think of questions you might like to ask each other. So right now we're going to start the actual dialogue. This is going to be done in an interview style format where we have, I will ask a question and each panelist will have an opportunity to respond. And once all responses are heard, they will have the opportunity to respond to each other. So we're going to start right now with perhaps the foundational question of what does sacred mean to you? How do you define sacred, particularly in the context of art? And in that, how do you define or understand sacred geometry from your perspective within the tradition? So we're going to start with Audrey, Sarah, Zahra, and then Laura. Okay? Audrey, go ahead.
All right. So what is sacred is that which is most cherished. And what can be more cherished than love? Whether it is the love expressed between divinity and our soul, or the love between other souls, what is most cherished than having your heart sown with the love of another, or planting seeds of love within another's being? What is more valuable? To treat another with such affection, to be kind to another. For me, this is what is most sacred. And I guess I try to be as broad-minded as I can in my art to kind of share more of what I feel is sacred.
Thank you. Sarah?
So, amazing thoughts that have come forward so far. And, you know, in the spirit of dialogue to some extent, Audrey, you know, your answer is fantastic. What is the sacredest love? You know, my teacher, Imam Mehdi Khorsani, was an amazing Sufi, he was an Iranian Sufi, and he said, what is Islam? It is love. Love. He said, what is Islam? You can sum up the entire religion in one word, love. And the Dalai Lama said, my religion is kindness. I couldn't agree more with what Audrey is saying about that. And I think the sacred is about the harmony and balance that comes living in peace and love with other people. It's about harmony and balance. It's about peace and about the relational experience of being in harmony with other people. And art, to some extent, is a vehicle for that. I think art is a vehicle for that sacred connection that we have to one another and to the universe, to the creation and to the divine. And in a sense, you know, for me, you know, I have a very processed view of the divine. I feel like the divine, the sacred, is being and becoming, and the process of, you know, there's a hadith that said that Allah said, "I was a hidden treasure and I desired to be known," and that was the reason for creation, and that experience of bring greater being, expanding the amount of being and amount of connection in the world is I think. Was I on mute?
No, you weren't on mute, but I think you cut out at the last second there. What was your last sentence?
I was just saying that's the.
Oh, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Sarah.
I'll just stop there.
That's okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so what's divine is definitely love, because, you know, creation in itself is because of love. And if I were just to, you know, say as an artist, as a human being, I'm actually not an artist. I'm not a creator, because, you know, whatever is present has always been, you know, it's already been created. If I define myself, I define myself as a tool, because through me, I'm projecting something that's been created. It's just being discovered through me. You know, I'm like a material, as a paint or a surface, and through me, things are discovered which were present but just hidden. So that in itself, that process for me is sacred, because whatever someone creates, whether it be an artist or any other profession, or we're discoverers, we're not creators. And if we accept that fact, we would be, you know, we'd be in a place of humility. And in a place of humility is where you can openly love, because you know you're not better than anybody. You are just the same. And at that point, all differences, they die. You're all on the same platform, and that allows you to receive, you know, to achieve that balance and harmony that Sarah was talking about. So that's what's sacred to me. That's my idea of me being an artist. When I create a piece of art, yes, I'm proud of something I've created, but at the back of my head, I know I've created it because there was an instigation, and I was a channel. That's it. I was the hands that created that, but in a sense, someone else did it for me, and that's the divine. So that in itself is my idea of sacred art. That's where I feel what's divine in art, in life, whoever we are. We're not creators, we're just discoverers. Some of us are more adventurous than others, but we're all just the same. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. You guys have so many things that I wish like we could have done this in person. There would have been so much more that we could talk about. Laura?
Hi. I have Grant Bierce's statement, a response to that question, but before I read it, I just wanted to mention that what is so interesting about everyone's responses is the focus on emphasis and on the concept of becoming. And when I think about the word love as an analog to the sacred, it's both a noun and a verb. So it's really beautiful to think of in terms of the creative arts about how this art is representative of both a process and its culmination, which is in effect like an expression of divine love. So I think that that is, that just really came out in everyone's statements. It's just wonderful. And Grant says something similar. He says that the sacred is anything that inspires movement toward God. So again, this idea of an action and its culmination, the truth and the real, the absolute and sacred geometry can be a means toward this movement. So short answer from him, long answer from me.
So to kind of follow up on that, so far you guys have discussed what makes something sacred to you from the perspective of your tradition. In what way, this is touched on a little bit, but maybe we can ask it more directly. In what way and if is your art sacred to you? Audrey?
Yeah, art sacred to me. Yeah, definitely it is. It is sacred to me because it is my kind of like what Zahra was saying, was that we're tools, you know, and sometimes I think of ourselves as instruments, you know, and so what I am doing, what I am hopefully putting together is something that is influential and moving for another in toward the divine, you know, and maybe it might not be clear at the onset, but that is definitely what's an internal motivation for me, and because of that, I guess I feel that it is sacred because it is something I'm sharing in a way, not with just other people, but with the divine himself. Because it definitely, it's definitely something that, you know, art is something that I feel something that just has so many different dimensions, and it can reach so many different grounds. And obviously one of those is getting a little bit closer to God.
Sarah?
Beautiful statements from everyone. I also love what Zahra was saying about humility and letting go of your defenses. And I think, being willing to, and I think Audrey touched on it as well, the concept that on some level the divine is happening through us. You know, we are happening as human beings. We're experiencing life, but on some level the divine is happening through us, and our interaction with each other is part of that manifestation of the divine. I think for me, my art is sacred to me in that it's a blessing that I'm grateful for. Part of it is I love art. I've always loved art. I love looking at it. I love making it. I love thinking about it. I love talking about it. I love studying art history. I love sharing art with people. I love being in a room with art. I love giving my art away, selling my art, being in a situation where art is a part of the world. And I think we're here for a purpose. You know, life's not just life's not just throwaway. You know, we have to make the most of it. And part of that is part of loving God is loving life, and my art for me is part of that love of life. And it's a gift for me, from me, and from me and other people, and from God to us. It's a gift from God to us. One of the blessings of God in the world is music and art and architecture, the manifestation of the human life at a higher level. I just think my art is sacred to me because it's a part of what makes life actualize, the actualization, self-actualization, which on some level is the highest calling for me, and actualization as part of a community of people. So.
Yes, on all levels, my art is sacred to me. You know, I mainly, work with a very weird medium, paper. I love using paper because, and I'm gonna get to the point, I'm just trying to connect the dots. So I use paper most of the times to create art, and that is not a choice medium. I mean, initially when I was starting out, people were like, you're a paper artist, what does that even mean? Because we think of it as a base, we don't think of it as a medium, but it has so much humility because we can tear it, we can, roll it, glue it, we can do so many things to it, and it still gives so much back to you. And so basically, I was always drawn towards it, and I keep coming back to it because there's something that instigates me and tells me that, yeah, this is what I should be working on. And if I did not have that instigation inside of me, and I mean, it's easier to, like go on a path which has been walked or which is easier, right? So that instigation, I truly, truly believe is something that is beyond me, that has come into me. And I'm really thankful for that because that allows me a level of relief that I'm not crazy, and that I'm supposed to, and I'm meant to do this. I'm really grateful that it's something that has worked out because people are interested and intrigued, and they want to buy this, and they want to know more about it. They're connecting to it. It's conversation. So I know I'm going in the right path. And even at times I feel that if this were not the case, I would keep coming back to it because it's something that in my heart, I know that, I'm supposed to be doing that. So what is that? I mean, I'm sure every one of you who's a creative or even a non-creative has felt like, you talk about, in your heart, something that feels right. What is that? If that's not divine, what else is it? I don't have any other word for that. I think that if it feels right, if things kind of click, that's the way. You want to call it God, you want to call it universe, you want to call whatever name of God that's out there in, it has to be him or her or it. So yeah, definitely, for sure. And do I want to portray, I mean, how do I portray my connection to God in my works? Again, I try to seek him in my florals, in things that inspire me from day to day. I try to pick up the most commonest of things at times, and really, it makes me think if that's something that is so common but so necessary. I mean, it's like they're the building blocks of things. Like, even, I mean, like water, we don't think too much about it, but because it's in abundance, or because it's just something in the background, right? but if it were to become scarce, we would really know how vital it is. It's just in our day-to-day life, we just forget about these things. So yeah, for me, all my art is definitely sacred.
Thank you, Zahra. Laura? Laura, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So Vera responds to the question of what does sacred geometry mean to you? Her response is, a renowned Vedanta teacher often said, I quote, Hindus don't only believe in one God, they believe there is only God, end quote. This implies that everything is sacred, yet some people think that this is sacred and others will say that it is not sacred. Why is that so? People have points of view. However, the view as truth is not affected or changed by our viewpoints. For myself, I try to live with the awareness that there is only God. Fortunately, I find that the creative process aids in seeing a wider view of the world. Connecting with the creative power and allowing it to flow during the art process increases my awareness of the sacredness in all. As for sacred geometry, all things can be reduced to its fundamental shapes or forms. Personally, when something is fundamental, it implies that it is primary and cannot be reduced any further, and gives the quality of sacredness. In my art, I use geometric shapes to symbolize the elements of nature which are associated with the psychic centers in between nature, ourselves. This indicates oneness and therefore sacredness.
Thank you. You all have brought up a really interesting question, which was asked by one of the artists during this initial phase of gathering questions. And that is, what significance, if any, does your personal choice of medium have? So for Zahra is this beautiful artist that uses paper and paint and gold paint. Sarah, you use canvas. Audrey, you're a photographer. Laura, you're also a photographer. Let's talk a little bit about, why do you choose those mediums, and is there any significance in those mediums for you, especially when what you've all shared so far is that there's a lot that goes into each of your artworks. There's a lot of meaning and a lot of thought that seems to underlie them. Please also, as we go, please feel free to respond to each other as well.
So for me, yeah, definitely how I got to photography. I actually started, making art when I was young, but of course, was drawing, because that's all I was given was, paper and pencils and pens and stuff like that. I definitely wasn't, I was kind of a rambunctious kid, so I wasn't given anything that was expensive. So I definitely couldn't have a camera. And I just never even imagined using a camera, maybe perhaps when I was young, but I did really love and was fascinated by photos and magazines. I collected a lot of magazines, and I would draw a lot of stuff actually that I saw in magazines. And but yeah, as far as how it's connected here, Picasso actually said that photography is painting with light, and to do something with light, actually, especially natural light, the way I think about it is, that is something that's definitely connects you, I think, to something much greater. I mean, the sun, when it's out, or the moon, you can do all kinds of things with the camera. And I think that's definitely does play a role in how I sort of connect with divinity in that sense, through photography, and always just and another thing is too, I guess, the light. Not only is there light, but there's an absence of light, and that absence of light is something that's also sort of you know, it can sometimes be scary, and it can definitely change the mood of things, that absence of light. And obviously, because, you know, as I mentioned in the beginning, because we are all at different stages or different parts in our journey towards the sacred, you know, sometimes we do step into things that are definitely without light. And for me, that contrast has definitely been there in my life. And so it's something that I definitely can relate to much easier through photography, I guess. And, you know, I'm not so emotional anymore. So it's yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I think I'm going to keep my answer to this really short and just say I started as watercolor, I moved to acrylic because I found it easier to express myself with it. But there's no super deep meaning behind my use of acrylic and canvas other than I just like to paint. I just enjoy painting. The one thing about my medium that might have some kind of significance is that I select my colors with a kind of idea for what the spiritual significance of the colors is. Sometimes think in terms of cometics or other spiritual systems where colors have a meaning. So perhaps if you want to look on that level, there's sacredness to the color selection. But in general, I just paint because I like to paint. It's not something really I like to.
So you guys already know why I work with paper, but I do watercolor as well. And I like the unpredictability of watercolor. That's why I use watercolor. But the gold that I put in is something that I relate to, you know, like the age-old quest to turn all the metals into gold. I mean, everybody throughout the history of time, they've tried to create things into gold because that's like the, you know, it's considered the closest divinest metal. I don't know if I'm, so yeah, I try to put a lot of gold in my work just because of that, consciously, and yeah, that's my thing.
I have a question for you, Zahra, if I can just jump in here. You said that you use watercolor because of its unpredictability, but I was looking at some of your work and it doesn't look unpredictable to me. It looks very precise. So, like, what can you just share with me more about that, please?
Yeah, thank you for that. So it's been a journey. I wasn't always like this. I mean, it's been hours and hours of painting things. But I like to achieve precision, and every time I try, you know, I'm close to it, something happens and I'm just either left with a piece that goes into a closet, or, you know, a piece that completely surprises me because I feel, oh my God, I've made this really, because it's succeeded further than my expectations. So watercolor has always taught me that, you know, I may be proficient in using it, but it will never let me conquer it. I don't know if that makes sense. That's one medium, and you must have, and it's generally known that, you know, with watercolorists as well, you cannot know what those pigments will end up doing. You can, you know, guess, but when you're eventually using them, there's a very large area where you just have to let go and let it work on its own. As far as for color selection, I mean, specifically for the 3 pieces that I submitted for the exhibition, they were inspired by the ocean and the earth, and so those color selections do come from nature. Other than that, I mean, yeah, I hope I answered your questions.
Yeah, you did. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Zahra. My grandmother was a watercolorist, and I try to use watercolors. I can totally sympathize. You're telling the truth. That's how watercolors are. So that's why I'm laughing. Thank you so much. Laura?
Yeah, I actually wanted to respond to Audrey. I love that quote that you brought in by Picasso. Being a semi-amateurish photographer myself, I find that is a really apt metaphor for the process of photography. And in terms of spiritual practice, what photography does, because I used to work in multimedia, and this photography thing is personal, kind of a little bit late breaking, but the process of photography as being a witness to the world around you was something that I was able to experience more immediately through that practice rather than through painting. I mean, in both creative processes, that's there. So I just wanted to acknowledge your commentaries on your photographic process. I think that's really, really wonderful. And in response to the question about media and medium for materials and process for Vera, and she says that the physical material is not important to her because it is her process that is first and foremost. She says that the representation of physical material definitely comes into play. And since her artwork involves elements of nature, she focuses primarily on color and texture, and in some cases, images that depict what these elements mean to her. Her art consists of many layers, and each color, texture, and image add to the meaning of the artwork more so than the media itself.
Thank you all again. Before we move on, did anybody want to say anything else on this? The joys of Zoom, we have to kind of have moments. Okay, thank you so much. So this next question, we're going to ask it kind of twice. Once in reflection of yourself and what you hope to communicate, and then again in what you hope people receive. So what is your artwork saying about you? But specifically, what is it saying about your own beliefs in relation to the tradition that you are a part of? What is it saying, or what do you hope it's saying about your relationship with your tradition to any viewer? Audrey?
So what is my art saying?
I should add that Audrey keeps getting put on the spot because he's the first in our lineup. If anyone needs a second to kind of collect their thoughts, please just say pass and we'll come back around.
Yeah, so what is my art saying in relation to my tradition, and what am I hoping to communicate? Well, pass, just kidding. Well, what I'm hoping to communicate is that hopefully that this place is a place of love, and that we can enter that circle from wherever we're at. And so I guess I always try to choose images that show that diversity in this world, and show that, you know, we are at different moments in our lives, and for some of us we're in very good moments, and for others we're in not so good moments. And so, but maybe perhaps before I thought maybe I was only going to show, you know, the good moments, and maybe show how maybe we should strive to be, but I thought that was sort of biased and unfair, and perhaps unrelatable to everyone, because for some of us it's very difficult to really strive and really develop love. And you know, Krishna Bhakti is about that. It's about the development of love, and it's about specifically the development of love of Krishna. And obviously Krishna is just another name for God, or the supreme, or the highest, or, you know, however you might want to call that entity, but if Krishna Bhakti is about the development of love and development of Krishna, and Krishna is everything, and Krishna encompasses everything, well, then we can't leave, nothing can be really left out. And since that's the case, I try to show just about anything and everything sometimes. And obviously, if somebody just looked maybe at one of my images, they might think that it is perhaps foul or inappropriate. But maybe as a collective, I hope that one day I am able to communicate to people that yes, there are some difficult moments in our lives, and there's maybe some embarrassing moments that we wish we could take back, but ultimately we're all trying to strive for something greater and something better and something as valuable as love and the development of it, for not only for our own selves but for others. And perhaps in my tradition, and in my particular branch or sampradaya, because it is very broad, and there are many people that are part of the tradition. There are many different views, some conservative, some liberal. And so I guess ultimately, in relation to my own tradition, what I hope to, how I guess I'm viewed, perhaps even by my own tradition, is that, I am trying to embrace the idea of all encompassing. And whereas I know that there's perhaps other views of, that maybe somehow or another we're all, should strive for sainthood, today and tomorrow and the day after that. And if you don't, then maybe perhaps you're ostracized, or you're just not really on that level of saintliness, and so you're maybe in a way you're inferior, unfortunately. And so but I think for such a person, it's sort of a limited view. And I mean, there's people like St. Augustine, who you may know, that had a very tumultuous life for many years until eventually he was granted sainthood. And so if we just look at examples like that, I think that obviously this is a lot to communicate in just one piece, but I think as a collective, I hope that's what I'm communicating, is that there is a place for all of us here in this world, and we all can strive to love a little bit more.
So, I think what I'm trying to communicate, I want to say, on a kind of side tangent, although it's connected to the question, is that, one of the beautiful things about this dialogue is listening to what other people have to say and listening to the comments that people are making is prompting a lot of thought for me. I meditated, I've been meditating on these questions for a while, but listening to what people have to say is really bringing up some real kind of openings and new thoughts for me. So it's really interesting to listen to people's comments. So thanks again for inviting me to be here and for everyone participating. I think one of the things that really is coming up for me in terms of what am I trying to communicate and what is the purpose of my art. Yes, it's communication of a lot of things, but I think one of the major reasons that I do art is actually part of my, one of the things you said when you invited us to do this dialogue is we're not trying to speak for our entire tradition. Interfaith dialogue isn't about speaking for all Muslims or all Hindus or all anyone. We're not trying to speak for all the people in the Bay Area or all women or all men or all people or all anything. We're not trying to speak for an identity individually. We're not trying to see one person speaking for an entire identity. My personal faith, and I think this is true of a lot of people in the Bay Area, but this is definitely true for me. My personal faith draws from a lot of different traditions. And, I came to Islam through Buddhism and Christianity. And one of the things that was really important to me as in my 20s, I didn't come to Islam until my 30s, although I was interested in Sufism and practicing Sufism on some level in a kind of loose sense, studying with a Sufi teacher, but didn't really start making the prayer and fasting and wearing hijab and being like a really observant Muslim. One of the things that was really important to me, and I think this is in Vera's comment about there is only God, is if you want to think there's only God, and I think this is touched on in Audrey's answer about the fact that that God is everywhere. And I think it's an interesting question to ask. I'd love to hear your answer on this, Audrey. The concept of La ilaha illallah, there's no God but God, how that relates to, there's only God. I'm curious of what people think about that, but I think there's a lot of commonalities. But if that's true, there's only God, then worship to some extent is awareness of God, is remembering God, that mindfulness, the consciousness is worship to some extent. That being in a state of devotion to God involves awareness, that you're in it all the time, but if you never think about it, you're not there. You could be in a room with people you love, but if you don't talk to them, you don't interact with them, you're just bodies in a room, there's no connection. You're, surrounded by people or things, but you have no connection to them. And that mindfulness awareness is a key part of what the religious life is about. For me, in terms of coming to Islam through Buddhism, mindfulness was a key core concept that I've worked with as a Muslim. And a lot of people translate taqwa or piety, which is kind of the highest value held for Muslim. There's a statement in the Quran: the best among you are the most pious. It's not a man or a woman, it's the best among you is the most pious. And piety is translated as God consciousness by some people. Dr. Zahra Ammar translated piety, taqwa, as God consciousness, I think, in his Quran. But it's something that those who are conscious of God, that's zikr, remembrance of God. And that's the core of the Sufi practice to some extent, is the constant remembrance of God, constant remembrance of God. And I think what I'm trying to communicate in my art to some extent is a reminder of God, the name of God, the geometry, I put the names of God in my art. I think about it as a sacred space. It's a way to remember God for me in the act of making it. It's a remembering of God, and it's an encouragement of people to be mindful of God. And if there is La ilaha illallah, if God is everything, if God is everywhere, there's no God but God. There's no reality but no little r reality but big R reality. There's no little being but big B being. There's no being but being. That to translate from the little moment to that greater reality involves an awareness. There has to be a mindfulness. There has to be a moment when you stop and you connect. That connection is the act of awareness that is kind of the essential key. If you think about the prayer, the Muslim prayer, there's no prayer without presence of heart. You can go through the motions all day. You can pray. But if you don't have any presence, it doesn't have that much meaning, if any. So in the same way, my art is an attempt to bring that mindfulness, to bring that presence into the world for myself and for the people who view my art.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Zahra, go ahead.
It's been really interesting hearing both these answers, and I was just wondering, these questions put you in such diverse planes of thought. My answer to this is something completely different, and just the way that others have perceived this question is so interesting, because it's been a pure pleasure listening to both of you, Audrey and Sarah, the way that you perceive and look at art, and the divine. And again, it's got me thinking, and that's like, a lot on the plate. For me, I guess, what's significant in anything that I create and that's relevant to my tradition is possibility. And me as an artist, because I've learned the rules of geometry that are specific to Islamic geometry, I guess I'm kind of a rebel, because I try to take the rules and then sort of bend them in my own way, which is not very popular amongst hardcore Islamic geometrists. But I'm okay with that because I feel strongly that what we create now will become tradition later. I mean, eventually, if other people connect to it, and if it goes on for some time, it becomes a tradition. It becomes part of history. It's no longer modern, so it's accepted. So for me, anything, I want to represent possibility that, if a tradition has been going on for centuries, yes, it's universal. And if it's the truth, it will be universal. But if a person can change it, then there's possibility for more. It's just because we are, as humans, are limited. We have not been able to discover more until now. That's why we have innovation. That's why we have inventions. That's why we have maybe more materials than people before. It's just because we have looked at more possibilities and tried them out and failed and succeeded. And now we go on forward to discovering new things. So in the Islamic tradition of creating art, people have been very conservative, and I understand that to a certain level. But I also believe that there has to be room for more things to come in. You know why? Because God or Allah is not limited. So how could we be limited? Yes, we are limited in our senses, in the number of colors we see, in our spectrum, in our hues, but that's just us because we are, confined to this body, right? What if a person sees another color? Or there was this really interesting concept that I came across a while back of, and I'm not sure if this is pronounced correctly, but people who are synesthetic, who see colors, or they hear colors, or they something related
you're
to
talking about synesthesia.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's there or not, but I wouldn't be surprised by it. I mean, because the possibilities are endless, because God is endless, right? So yeah.
Thank you, Zahra. Laura?
Yeah, so Grant does not have a direct answer to what the question of what are you trying to communicate. So I can actually condense together two statements that sum up his view. He says that what he would like is to evoke a sense of something beyond the superficial and not something that's not exclusive to the followers of Islam. But something where a viewer can, through whatever means they have or from whatever background they're coming from, find something of the truth and universal nature of reality in his work. So this kind of echoes his initial response to the question of how do you envision the sacred as being both sort of a process of movement. And he also says that he doesn't really consider, he says it's not for me to judge what my artwork is saying about me. His intention is merely to promote something, not merely, it's quite a large thing, to promote something beyond individual belief and values.
Thank you. So that question was really meant to kind of directly ask about what of your tradition comes through you and puts it and becomes part of your work. So along those lines, kind of the other side of that, you have now all had an opportunity to view each other's work through the website and through discussion at times. When you view, and when I say the other, I refer, you know, if you are Hindu, it's a Muslim, etc. When you view the artwork of the other tradition, one of the artists of the other tradition, what feelings does that evoke for you, if any? Does it cause you to ask questions? Does it cause you to have a thought you never thought of before? Where does it take you to visually, emotionally engage the artwork of this project?
So that is me. Well, I guess definitely where it takes me is a place of wonder. I don't know very much about Islam, but I think I know enough, though, you know, from the people that I've talked to and my friends that I've had that are Muslim, and of course, so many other different traditions as well. But we're speaking about, you know, the relationship between Hinduism and Islam, and yeah, so definitely there's a side for me that still, you know, becomes wondrous. But as I'm hearing, you know, from you guys even today, and from just being around other friends that I've had throughout my life, you know, there is a sense of love and peace and harmony and just warmth, you know, that I definitely feel from Muslim people, and in your art that I've seen, I guess I just wonder like how like you feel that it's expressed in that way. I mean, if I am on the right track, I guess, if you would agree with me, then I just wonder like how is it that it's being expressed for you as well, and I guess I just wonder about that. And sorry, Sarah, but I didn't get to answer your question because I didn't quite hear it all. But if you want to ask me again, I'm more than happy to share with you if you want.
So I think the question was kind of connected to the idea of how mindfulness connects to the idea of there being only God, or la ilaha illallah, that there's no God but God. And it's I'm kind of connected to this answer, which is that when I look at the art of a non-Muslim artist that's intended to be sacred, not that all art isn't sacred, I mean, I see sacredness in all art, but how, you know, my filter is really, where is God in this? How is this God? And how do other people see God? And I think that idea of the fact that we're different, we're supposed to be different, you know, we're supposed to be diverse. And in our diversity, you know, I said something about how the form in my art, the floral form is over the structure. I mean, I think the diversity of religious traditions, in a sense, is like unbounded forms over structure. You know, the underlying truth that's all of our truth, and then we have these kind of up surges, these upwellings of reality from the underlying truth. And I think, you know, I don't know that much about Hinduism myself, but read a little, know a little bit about it, but my understanding of the divine in Hinduism is that the divine has manifestations that are all kind of connected to the underlying truth. That I think looking at that, I feel really curious and respectful and kind of in awe of the diversity of how we see the world. I think Zahra said, something about we don't know how, Allah is unlimited, God is unlimited, but we're limited because of our senses. And we're limited because of our mind, in Buddhism, the mind, there's in Western, European, Euro-US science, there's 5 senses. But in Buddhism, there's a 6th sense. The mind is a sense in Buddhism. And we are limited to some extent by the sense of our mind, what we have in our mind. And I think looking at what comes out of other people's mind gives you an insight into like a reality, like a color or a sound or music or a smell, or the smell of a flower, the smell of, the color of a sky, things that you haven't seen before. A waterfall, you go someplace you haven't seen, or a sound you haven't seen. I think it's like that looking at other people's art. There's something that you see the color, you see the form, which is different, but you also see the manifestation of mind as a sense that gives a different dimension to your understanding, expands for me personally, I think it's an insight into other people's sense of mind and their reality of the world. And back to your question about my question, Audrey, which is, how do you see, you talked about love as you were talking about your tradition as love in all kinds of forms. I think I wasn't totally clear. I don't understand it completely, but that Krishna is everything. Kind of Krishna has all these manifestations of love. That the divine manifestation of Krishna is all these expressions of love. I'm curious, and I guess connects to how do you see Muslims art? How does that connect to the unity of God? Kind of an interesting. I think it's at the edge of my vision. It's at the edge of my consciousness about what I'm trying to ask. So I don't know if I'm articulating it right. But how does the idea of Krishna being so universal, the divine Krishna being so universal, how does that connect to the universality of God in general? And I don't know if that's a question that can even be answered. It's intended very respectfully. I'm just I think I have some answer, but I'd like to hear it from your perspective, or more on it from your perspective.
Well, just let me make sure I have the question right. So how is Krishna universally manifesting his universal love? Was that it?
I think it's kind of outside the bounds of the artistic dialogue, so I think I'll withdraw the question. But I think it is interesting looking at your art, how love and art are connected, and I think maybe it's outside the bounds of the dialogue. I'd like to defer to Rachelle's interpretation of whether or not this is within the realms of the conversation. I'm trying to stay within the boundaries that were established about staying the focus of art. So
Thank you,
an interesting question.
Thanks for that. I think I also want to make sure I understand your question correctly, because I actually don't think it's outside the realm of what we're talking about right now. And I'm really grateful that you brought it up. So if I were to restate your question as, how is Krishna as a form of God also the universal God? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that is some of what I'm asking. And I don't know if it's outside the bounds of the discussion because it's not necessarily art related.
Well, it's related to Audrey's spirituality as it is in his art. So Audrey, would you like to answer that? Or do you want to think about it for a minute?
No, sure. So you said, how is Krishna, can you rephrase, can you say it again?
how is Krishna as a form of God also universal? In what way? Where is the universality coming in that? Because Krishna is one form, but God is universal.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, I mean, kind of to what you guys have been saying, Krishna is unlimited. And so if Krishna is unlimited, he can be universal and he can take form. He can be a complete contradiction if he wants. There's nothing he can't do. There's no boundaries for Krishna or the Supreme. So yeah, he's easily universal and can take form as Krishna, or he can take any other form that he likes. Is that okay?
So Adri, what I'm hearing you say is that the universality comes in part because Krishna is simply a form of God, but God can take whatever form God wants. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, well, in the Krishna Bhakti tradition, Krishna is the ultimate form.
That is the ultimate form of God.
That is the ultimate form of God. But that's not to say that he can't take other forms. So, yeah, it's just not, he's not limited to that form, but that is, simultaneously, it is the ultimate form as well. And that's definitely the Krishna Bhakti game.
Thank you.
It makes me want to paint on the names of God in terms of love, listening to this conversation, paint on the names of God that reflect love, to connect across peace and in reflection on this conversation.
And
maybe I'll just add to that too. It's just, because I guess when I say, Krishna is the ultimate form, and it's just so hard to kind of put that into an actual shape, and it's just I don't want to feel like I don't want to say too little, because we're talking about the ultimate divine form. I mean, there's much more obviously that you would have to read about it, just like as I'm sure in Islam there's just mounds and mounds of information about what that form it looks like and what it is and what it means and all the dimensions. I mean, how could we ever really discuss it? I don't know that we ever really could, and so just even though I'm saying this is Krishna's ultimate form, there's just so much more to say to that.
It's a good time to remember that this is an introductory dialogue. There are so many places where we could go down so many different kinds of rabbit holes, and hopefully eventually we do. Zahra?
I just want to add to that what Audrey said. I completely empathize with you because, in one aspect, sometimes when we say Allah, the Rahim, the forgiver, or we try to put, the 99 names, as Sarah said, or we try to give him some attribute, we actually ask for his forgiveness because we are limiting him to those names. So, because he's so way much more than that. It's just because our human mind can grasp that, we put attributes to it. He is way more than attributes himself. So I completely understand that, how do you define the limitless? It's kind of like, but you have to, because we are beings that need meaning and that need to understand. So it has to be done. So going on into the dialogue, and this is for Sarah, because when I read up about your birds of paradise, I was really interested in hearing more about it, because you know, Islam has certain boundaries, and you've touched upon this in your other artworks too, and what it means to break those boundaries, or, you know, put layers over it. I just, you know, you say over here that just as a point extends to a line, then further reaches the limit and becomes an arc, then a boundary of space to form a circle, then forms a periphery and a contained area, which can in turn give rise to multiple polygons within its bounds. And then you're saying for the floral form that it's juxtaposed against the lattice of the circles, you know, like layering upon the boundaries. I just want to kind of like probe into your mind. If you know, I just want to hear what you're thinking right now, because this kind of a thought comes into my head a lot as well. What it means to be traditional, but then not so, and what are boundaries, and how are we within it but beyond it.
Thank you, Zahra. Sarah, I'm going to let you just think about that for a second, and we're going to have Laura answer, and then we'll come back around. Okay? Go ahead, Laura.
I think I have too many questions in my head. Can you reiterate the most recent question?
Sure. It was, when you view the artwork of the other tradition in this show, and you can certainly answer this from your own perspective as well, what feelings, ideas, thoughts, what comes up for you? What does this artwork say to you?
Well, neither of the artists directly addressed that question, so I can respond to it myself. I looked through the artworks at some length prior to the panel, more as an outsider since I'm standing in for the artists. And what instantly struck me as I tried to consider some of the questions that Rachelle had emailed me was the sense of synergy amongst the pieces. I found it kind of challenging, in fact, to locate each piece within a tradition. I think that there are formal elements that do locate these pieces in particular traditions, but if I really responded to it, you know, Zahra had talked about synesthesia. If I responded to the visual from an embodied place, I couldn't locate myself in a specific tradition, and that was like this mysterious place that the artwork put me into. A place of kind of ambiguity, but it could also be oneness. So I think that was really, really brilliant.
Thanks, Laura. Sarah, did you want to respond to Zahra?
I think I want to respond to Zahra with a question. Thanks for looking at my work and that contemplatively. It's really, mashallah, that's really nice of you to take the time to look at it. And I think my question I would ask back to you is, how do you see, you talked about how tradition is created in the current time. So in a sense, that's the birds of paradise over the lattice. How do you see your work as it breaks tradition, but creates tradition? And if you could speak to that, I'm interested to hear how you see that connecting.
So before Zahra answers that wonderful question, we actually got a question from our audience, from Mary Volmer, that I think kind of complements your question. And this is actually going to be the last question that we answer today. There's a lot of questions that we didn't get to, but we've just had such a nice discussion. That's totally fine. So Mary says, prophets in all traditions break patterns of belief and suggest new or deeper or different ways of seeing. Do any of you recognize prophetic elements in your work or in others' work? And please feel free to kind of, you know, speak to that, speak to Sarah's question, any of those. Can you restate your questions, please, Sarah?
Sure. And I'll put my answer in really quickly. I don't see prophetic elements in my work because, according to my understanding of the Islamic tradition, prophecy ended with the Prophet Muhammad when he transcended. That was the end of the prophetic revelation. So I don't see elements of prophecy per se in my work or in anyone else's work being done currently. That's just my personal response to that. And so that's just what I want to say. But I do think in terms of tradition and creation of tradition, my question for Zahra, is, you're asking how I see the form breaking the lattice as the flower over the circles, and I think this is a question that you are in time, and your work comes out and then begins to be in the world, and it creates a new realm of being, and that in turn ricochets off into the world and creates its own ripple effect. And you mentioned in your work, you're not doing it exactly like the geometrist told you to. You're kind of breaking the rules a little bit. You're a rebel to extent. You told yourself a rebel to some extent. How do you see, and I think that's beautiful. I think that's necessary. I mean, the prophet, peace be upon him, our prophet was a rebel. He completely went against the rules. And his wives, Rachelle, were rebels in many, many ways. So how do you see yourself breaking the form in ways that establish beauty in the world, in your art? How do you see the way you're breaking the form? How do you see yourself creating new traditions and breaking the form in ways that establish beauty and newness?
Yeah, so it's a little scary, because there's always this force which is established and traditional, and then going against it. And yes, you were right that the prophet was a rebel, and if he were not that strong, I mean, where would we be? Where would this world be as it is right now? So to be a rebel is to be the first to pave the way of a possibility that others are probably just too scared. They see it, that's why they like it, or they don't like it, which is again a good thing, because in my art I feel that if a person responds to it, either they hate it or they love it. I appreciate both responses. What I do not appreciate is if a person looks at it and doesn't give it a second look, or if it doesn't make them think, if it's like meh, and then they walk past it. That is what I'm scared of. So even if they don't appreciate it because it's not traditional, I'm okay with it. It still scares me as an artist and as a human being, because we're, as humans, we are always wired to conform because it's easy. It's the harder path to kind of like, be different. And this is where it interests me when other artists are taking traditional things and building upon them, and they see things differently. That's why I really wanted to ask you that question, that you've layered things that were traditional and that something that you thought was significant but was not mainstream. And it made me think. So yeah, as far as my work being prophetic, as Zahra already said, that prophecy is something that divine prophecy is something that ended with the prophet, and there's no more addition to Islam per se. However, there's always going to be a connection between God and human beings. I mean, because we are in effect his children, and he's not going to let us go like that, right? So there is definitely communication, whether it be on a personal level, whether you see it in nature. So prophecy, in the strictest form of the word, yes, it's done with the prophet himself, but in the non-traditional form, and how I see it is there's always going to be an open line of communication, because, you know, he is love and he would never do that. You know, his love is boundless, and to love someone is to be there through whatever it may be. So yeah.
Thank you, Zahra. Audrey, did you also want to answer?
So what was the question? Is my work prophetic? Was that it?
So Mary says that prophets in all traditions break patterns of belief and suggest new or deeper or different ways of seeing. Do you recognize any of these elements in your work?
A different way of seeing. I guess perhaps it can be for some people, you know. If perhaps we have a vision at the time that is perhaps limited in a way, and perhaps if my work is somehow a little bit more broad-minded, which I hope it is, then I guess in that sense it could be.
Laura?
I don't think any of the artists that I'm speaking on behalf of could have answered that question, so I'll have to pass.
Okay, thank you. Well, everybody, we're nearing time towards our end. Right now, it's so difficult to end because it really feels like we really just got started going, and that's why dialogue is a continual project. It takes the building of relationships, and I hope that this inspires other people to pursue and think about what this could do for their own communities, whether it's a dialogue centered around art or praxis or anything else. Before we conclude, though, I would like to invite everybody, do you have any concluding thoughts maybe on the place of art and interreligious dialogue, or a last statement that you would like to share with our audience? This is not required. Feel free to pass, but we're just going to go down the line. And please let us know if you have any thoughts that you would like to offer in conclusion for today. Audrey?
Well, I just want to thank everybody again who was part of this event and putting everything together, and thanks to Zahra and Sarah and Laura and you, Rachelle. Thank you all for just hanging out and sharing your different views and sharing so much that I definitely, what I take away is I guess I just wasn't far from it in my mind, but it's just everyone seems to want to share something kind and good, and it's always nice to be part of something like that. So thanks again.
Thanks so much for including me. Thanks so much, Zahra, Audrey, Laura. Thanks, Rachelle, for organizing this, and for Kara organizing this. I'm incredibly honored to have been included. Really, it's a bright point in my work as an artist to have been included in this. It really, really, really touched my heart, and brought some thoughts that were not clear for me into more clarity. I hope that the audience participants, the people who were listening to the dialogue, enjoyed it, and thank you so much for attending and listening to the dialogue. My profound gratitude to everyone who participated in this meeting. Thanks so much.
I'm deeply grateful that this opportunity came my way, because I got to hear all of you. Thank you so much. Throughout this dialogue, there were many points in which I got thinking, and I'm like, oh my God, that's something that I thought that I had in my mind, but you know, when you put it into words and you hear it from somebody else, it just makes so much more sense. So when I heard Audrey and Sarah talking about their views, it kind of really brought life to a lot of things that were already in my head, and then also gave me a chance to view what was in their heads as well. So that's just amazing. And so I'm really thankful for this opportunity. I'd like to close with something that occurred to me a while back, and has been a continuous thing that's happening, because I'm a practicing Muslim, and although I live in an area which is diverse, there aren't many Muslim artists who are also practicing, as well as, going out there in the community. And so what happened one day was I was showing somewhere in a gallery, and a person comes up to me and, starts talking, and we have a wonderful conversation. And he is this Puerto Rican gentleman. And in the end, he says, it's because of this art that I'm talking to you. I wouldn't even have approached you in any case, and we would never have this interaction or this wonderful conversation if it weren't for this art. Because, with media and with the current perception of how people perceive each other, it has brought such a divide that you're not sure what kind of boundaries you'd be stepping. You know what I mean? It's also brought people closer together, but people are more cautious these days. So art kind of opened up an area where people could easily come and feel comfortable, and have that space where anything was possible, just because there was something to talk about. There was a dialogue. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachelle, and thanks, Audrey and Zahra and Sarah and CARE, GTU, of course, for hosting this. Can't speak on behalf of the artists for this, but I just think this is such a wonderful and timely event to have people from all over the place, from different walks of life and different traditions, come together and talk. To echo what Zahra said, that it's so much needed right now to have more opportunities for connecting with one another. And I'm very honored to at least be a stand-in in this process. So thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you again to all of our panelists, to CARE, to the CDS, to the CIS, who also contributed to this entire project. Thank you again to all of you who've been here to share your experiences and your questions with us. Thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty. Thank you for your creativity and your insight. And I truly do hope that this begins other dialogues elsewhere, like a domino effect. There's so much that I wish we could continue to talk about, but this is really the whole reason this show happened, was for this moment, so that we could continue to talk. We miss our missing artists. Uh-oh, am I gone? Okay, I'm back. Zoom. Please, again, check out the panel that's going to be coming up on November 13th. That will be on sacred art as a medium for interreligious dialogue with Dr. Tazim Qassam from Syracuse University, our own Catherine Baruch at GTU, and Dr. Vijaya Nagarajan from USF. And we will have a response from Justin Zoli, who his own art was not featured in this show, but he submitted the artwork of the late Om Prakash Sharma, very celebrated artist, and we're very grateful to have his work as part of this project. Om Prakash was Justin's teacher, and so Justin will be joining us for that panel to talk about how art engaged his life and changed him, and then also through our panelists. who will be exploring aesthetics from different angles. That will be the capstone of this exhibition. Drawingthesoul.com is going to be online until December something? Lydia? Okay. For a little while longer. Thank you again so much. Artists, please stay with me for like another 5 minutes or so. We're just going to quick debrief after this. But otherwise, Lydia, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, just thank you so much, Rachelle, and everybody for such a fascinating couple of hours. This has been really amazing. Thank you to those of us who are still with us for tuning in. And do stay tuned for more events that are coming up. Okay, thanks everyone.